All right. GM, everyone, and welcome to Numbers Therapy, episode 39. Today's episode titled The Patient Trader, and obviously a little bit intended to be leading or intriguing. I just want to explain real fast the frame of the title of the episode today, certainly oriented more from my perspective and observations. I think you're going to find this episode to be absolutely fascinating and maybe even a different structure than what we've seen in the past. So, purpose of Numbers Therapy, as we know, is to talk through the macroeconomic, operational, financial, technical, trading-based, and other direct dimensions of Web3. We're putting the pieces together to help everyone understand the latest picture, continue to elevate, and hear some incredible and awesome backstories along the way, and have a laugh as well. Everyone who's live, of course, the intent is that you're able to ask questions. And so whether it's in elementary or intermediate question or more advanced, please drop your questions in. It's very likely that somebody has the same question. I'll make sure that it gets answered. We want everyone, of course, along for the ride all the way. And then lastly, Numbers Therapy, of course, is rated NFA, as in none of what you hear is financial advice. So without further ado, and on to today's guest and episode. What happens when you put a bunch of degens in a room who love money and cool projects, but who also like the action and excitement? You get bets and you get movement. So needless to say, when we get someone who is a full-time trader and goes completely against this norm, it stands out. Today's guest is a very cool example of a mindful, sharpshooting trader and investor, and he certainly has a unique approach. What's more, I think his approach to trading and projects can be widely applied as a different frame for how we allocate time and balance profits with life, which surprisingly don't always go against each other, and more on that soon as well. Throughout the bulls and the bears, our guest has made a name by making power bets, kind of conviction bets, but more targeted, with very, very deliberate conviction matched with a very methodical process in the background. His voice is soothing, and his insight and wisdom always welcome. Always happy to hear his thoughts, catch up when possible, and have him as a friend. Please, everyone, welcome Tys to the stage, everyone. Tys, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me on. I'm always excited about an opportunity to chat with MVHQ. And so this is fun for me to see a lot of people that I've gotten to know in the room here. And yeah, it's excited to talk and have fun. Hopefully I can share a thing or two that will be useful.
I think you will. I'm very confident in that. Even our catch-up conversation the other day, I learned from that, let alone from this conversation. So I'm very confident that that's going to be the case. So let's start with maybe the foundational before. Can you maybe talk us through your pre-Web3 background? What was the hustle of Tys like in years before Web3?
Sure. So I always did all kinds of random stuff. I always just had hustles because I resisted having a full-time job or something that would lock me down. I liked my mobility. And I was into flipping, finding things on Craigslist or Kijiji in Canada, and buying and selling stuff or just taking odd jobs. Would build websites, do digital marketing. My mom had an e-commerce store for her business, so I helped her build that. And then I ran retreats with my friends. So we would rent retreat centers in Hawaii or Costa Rica, and bring in local guides or educators, different kinds, whether it was fitness and health or entrepreneurship and business. And we would just, sell tickets to say 40 people, and then we would take them on adventures, and they would do workshops and that kind of thing. So I always oriented my life around how can I keep my freedom and make money doing things that I enjoy. And so I was kind of just bouncing around, flying by the seat of my pants, trying to just get by, pay the bills, until I kind of stumbled into crypto and trading.
I think what's interesting about what you're saying too, right, is that a lot of the pieces that you just laid out, right, like digital marketing, websites, the concept of these trips, right, which have kind of benefits that exist and things that you like, it's kind of laying the foundation of Web3, right, before it's even starting. You naturally have several of these components that you've experienced with, and therefore are probably that much more easily able to assess projects and what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a part of me that I was always, I would consume a lot of content like podcasts or YouTube content from whether it was Tim Ferriss or Gary Vee or whoever was the person at the time that was producing content. And so and then trying to apply that to like the business that I had with my friends or flipping or side hustles or whatever. So I think from even when I was like 15 or 16 years old is when I started to kind of attune my business mind or just like having an eye for opportunity. And so I think that did help me coming into this space, as well as I was very comfortable taking risks before I even got into trading, because there were times that I would hop on a plane and go to Costa Rica or Hawaii or even just down to San Diego, wherever, where I have friends. And I wouldn't have enough money in my bank account to pay for my accommodations like 3 days from when I got there. So I think just like having a hustle kind of mindset, and being very comfortable with taking risk and saying like, I'm going to figure it out. That's, I think, prepared me quite a lot for trading.
I think that's super, valuable and foundational what you're saying, right? Like if you have a sense of like what, trying to always solve and solve out of something, right? So you do have a place to stay. So like, and you know what that's like, and it's going to naturally frame how you think about things. And therefore, a quote that I think you'll probably go on to at some point say, but the idea of like continuing to play the game and managing that and also being able to take risks. So I can totally see how a lot of these foundational things will play into this perfectly. So yeah, what was your entry like into Web3? Was it, I heard you say crypto there. Was that your initial pass into this space? And then did NFTs come afterwards? Like, how did you eventually land into NFTs and what we touch now?
Yeah, originally I would buy like little tiny bits of Ethereum or Bitcoin on like my Coinbase app, but like that it was not sophisticated. It was not big bets or anything like that. I was just messing around. It wasn't until BitClout released that I started to gain some traction. So BitClout was like, imagine Twitter, but every single user has their own creator coin, and you can speculate on those creator coins. So if you think someone's going to produce great content and grow, then you might have bought their coin on BitClout with the intention of selling it for more later, right? But I got on BitClout as a creator. Like I was doing the retreat thing with my friends. I was producing freestyle content, like a freestyle rap kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get on BitClout. I'm going to produce content. Maybe I'll be able to monetize it. So I got on there. But really quickly, I started to see this meta of influencers on Twitter would join BitClout and they would share the link to their BitClout profile on Twitter. And then instantly, like within seconds, people would be aping their creator coin. And these things had ridiculous bonding curves. It was very degenerate. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, I can play this game. Like, I'm going to try this. So I started getting in like the Discord for that and talking with people and trading. And so I went on there with like maybe $50, and then I don't exactly know how long it took, but I made like $20,000 on BitClout. And around that time, it started to I made some money. It started to kind of die down. There was always a lot of controversy around it. So this was around the time like NFTs were really catching my attention. And I'd be on Clubhouse, like listening to rooms about NFTs. And I knew BitClout was starting to fade and I was going to have to get my money off of there. So I said to myself one day, I'm going to buy an NFT because that just seems like the natural thing for me to learn about next. And like the way that I learn about something is just like participating. So I said, I'm going to buy an NFT. I decided that I was going to open Clubhouse. I was going to find an NFT room and I would buy the first NFT like under $100 that I heard about. So I went on there. There was a guy talking about a project called strawberry.wtf. He was launching it. He later became one of the devs for Oni. And I bought his NFT. And then I immediately went on OpenSea and saw it was trading for below what I minted it for. And I was like, oh, okay, this would be a bad trade if I intended to flip this. And that's how it started for me in NFTs.
So I want to call it a couple of things in here, right? Like first and foremost, a lot of what you're saying, I feel like is really going to carry through. I just feel like the lens that you take on this, even when you and I were talking the other day, I mean, for anybody who's listening, right? Like we all do this, right? We all learn and like know we're learning whatever else. But like, I feel like Tys's lens towards proactively learning upfront and knowing that things are going to be structured in like experimentation format is really, really interesting how he thinks about it. So not to oversell you, Tyson, and then put you in a tough position, but I think it's just a really, really cool thing. The other thing that I want to call out too is I was trying to preempt you and cut in there to avoid someone like what AI did, which is ask you to drop some beats, but you might be stuck now. I'm just want to warn you at some point. I don't know if it's now or later. You might be stuck having to do something. So that's absolutely a fantastic content or context that you provided. I think it'll really give people a sense of how you think and start to lay that foundation. Before we get into that, like, entering NFT land even more and kind of where you went, and maybe we could pull back for a second, because I remember what you said originally. Was, you do care about like your life and orientation. You didn't take jobs because you didn't want to be constrained. You wanted to be able to have the life that you wanted, so on and so forth. So let's maybe start there, right? If you had to say in terms of your overall goals in general, like how would you rank or list the goals that you have, life goals in general? And where does trading money, like how does that all fit in?
Sure. I never really had any like big, bold money goals. I just wanted to have enough money to keep my freedom, and make money in a way that allowed me to be mobile. And right now, they're kind of simple. I mean, I'm in Costa Rica at the moment, but I live in Canada in a tiny little mountain town. The population's like 1,000 people. My community, for the most part, is either like old retired people that kick my ass at curling every Thursday and Friday, or like young, like low income families that are just living a simple life in the mountains. People chop wood to heat their homes, and it's a very resourceful, down to earth community. And so, really, my goals are kind of simple. It's like having a homestead, having land to have a family and grow food, and just like enjoy my community. I like to be outside, be on the paddleboards, go camping. So really, it's like I like to just enjoy myself, and I want to get the hell out of there probably every winter, right? So allowing myself to continue coming to Costa Rica and at least live a little bit bougie for a few weeks every year. So it's as far as that all goes, it's pretty simple. And then things come up, like me and my buddies recently built a sauna, and so lately my goals have been sort of oriented around manifesting things more physically with my hands. What can I build that I can share with my community? What skills can I learn that don't involve my eyes staring at the screen and bleeding for hours a day? So I mean, I'm kind of rediscovering right now, like where I want to set my sights next. But I've always had pretty simple goals, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. Yeah, honestly, what can he do? I don't disagree with you, Bad, with what you're saying. And of course, like the reason I'm asking this question is just like, you can see like very, very much lays the foundation for how he's then going to approach trading and how it fits into his life. And then what's interesting about that is it's not a losing proposition. It's not necessarily that he spends less time and therefore he comes out as a loser compared to other, in quotes, compared to other people. As we all know, that's not the case, right? I mean, he's very, very, skilled at what he does, of course. So it's a really different, interesting approach that I'm excited to talk more about with you, Tys. So, okay. So now that you entered, we have that as foundation in terms of what your goals are, how you want it to live, what's going to make you happy, all those kinds of things. So, you do your initial test on the trade, you see it goes down, right? But you're intrigued, you think there's something here that exists. So what was your original mentality at that point? Was it, you think the space, was it kind of measured where you want to see how exciting and frothy the space is, for instance, and then from there you'd react and, dial it up if you needed to dial up? Like, how were you thinking about it initially, and how like methodical was that path in?
Sure. So at this point, it's not methodical at all. Like BitClout, I just felt like I fell into the most like addictive and fun video game that I'd ever played. But I was like making some money. It was, I was making more money than any of the jobs that I was doing. And then with NFTs, I mean, I bought that strawberry, and then I think 6 days later, I bought a cool cat like the day of or day after they minted. I didn't mint any. Because like I was just figuring out like how to hear about mints and everything, right? But I heard about cool cats right after they minted out. I bought one. Those were going crazy. I was in the Discord like screaming like, "We like the cats!" Like having a blast, watching the prices go up. And I was pretty much just flipping cool cats for a few days. But within it's like 6 to 9 days of me buying that first NFT, I bought a cool cat and flipped it to Mike Tyson like the next day. So I mean, I remember seeing like that I made the sale and it was like a 2x from what I bought it for. And I'm like, oh my God. So I probably sold it for like 1.4 ETH or something. And I go and I'm like, I wonder who bought it. And then on OpenSea, it says official Mike Tyson with a blue check mark. I'm like, holy shit, Mike Tyson just bought my NFT, my cool cat. And then he made it his profile picture on Twitter. And then I'm like in the cat's Discord and my name's Tyson. I'm like, I sold a cool cat to Mike Tyson. Like, we're both named Tyson. And then everybody's like freaking out. I go on Twitter Spaces. People are asking me my story, and I'm fresh to NFTs. So that for me was just this ridiculous, exciting thing to happen that just hooked me, right? So the thrill of the cool cat mania and being able to take advantage of it and also like be just laughing and having a blast the whole way, that's what hooked me. So then I was flipping cool cats. You know, I flipped cool cats all the way from whatever my first purchase was, super low, all the way up to wherever they top. And so yeah, it was cool cats really that made me be like, okay, I'm getting all my money off BitClout, I'm putting it all in NFTs. And with the attitude of like, this is just fun. Like, this is hilarious and fun. I'm like addicted already and it's working. Like, I'm making money, so I'm just gonna take all my BitClout money, put it all here, and just see what happens. That's basically it.
That makes total sense. And I think, first off, shout out to Cool Cats again. This is the second straight week of mentioning Cool Cats and nostalgia there. So coincidence, not coincidence, I'm not quite sure. But the other thing that stands out to me about your approach that you take is like, it feels like it fits your personality very well too, where it's like it's intentionally fluid, right? So I feel like oftentimes there's this pressure where like you look around, especially, you know, within MVHQ and elsewhere, everyone's like, somebody's better at something always, right? Like somebody's has a better art eye, somebody's better snipers, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever like the functional thing is that exists, somebody's better at it somewhere, right? And the approach that I feel like you took was not a forced approach, and you're intentionally fluid with how you approach things, right? So you're not necessarily trying to become like a specialist per se, but you're taking your methodical approach and just figuring out where things are going and then making your decisions from there. And it's more about like your process and how it like interacts with your life than it is that you're going to be an expert sniper or an expert something else. Would you agree with that? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think the one thing I realized right away was like, okay, if I want to keep doing this, then I just need to figure out where attention is going to go next, right? And so I didn't have a strategy at all. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where things were going, but it was always just in my mind trying to anticipate where attention was going to go. And so, I mean, I remember like early on, like, this is hilarious, like how I tracked wallets. Like I literally would just have tabs open on OpenSea activity pages for different profiles. So I would have like 40 tabs of people that I knew were like Twitter influencers or like Gary Vee or whoever it was, right? And that's how I'm tracking wallets, because I know that if their attention goes somewhere, then attention from everyone else is going to go somewhere. So I would see somebody buy something, and then I'm like, okay, I bet they're going to tweet about this next. And so like, I'm going to buy it. And then they would tweet about it. And then I was like, great, this is going just as planned. Now other people are buying it. Or I'd be sitting on Twitter Spaces all day long, seeing what people were talking about. I find the Twitter Space with the most listeners, and then if they started talking about something, like, I'm gonna go buy it. Like I was always just in that mindset of like, basically my strategy was setting myself up to have the best flow of information that I could, so that I could front run wherever attention was going to go. And that was pretty much it. That was my strategy. And it's just hilarious to think about what that looked like then, because it was just my laptop and just tons of tabs, right? But there was a disproportionate opportunity as well because information traveled slower.
Yeah. Totally.
So there was more of an opportunity to do the front running.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, it was a totally different market at that point, right? Like much more inefficient in the past. So that totally makes sense. So before we get to that and like your evolution of what you just said, and yeah, Poop, I totally agree with you. I'm very relaxed right now listening to this as well. So before we get into, you know, your evolution of tools and all those kinds of things, you've been spending, I believe, the past several weeks building a sauna, if I'm not mistaken, right? So what is that like? And for myself or for the other folks that are in here, on a scale of like 1 to really antsy, how antsy are you about like missing great mints or flips or new projects? What is that like from the Tys perspective?
I travel up and down that spectrum. Like when I'm in it and I'm enjoying myself and I'm at my buddy's shop, like up the back road off grid with no cell service, and we're solving problems and building and it's rewarding. Like I can definitely get myself to a place where I forget about it. But then the moment that I get home and like my office is there with my, monitors and everything, and I'm straight to my computer because I want to see what's going on. I just genuinely enjoy the game. So, and then that's the reason that I take on a project like that as well, because I need things like that to get me away from my screen. Otherwise, I'll sit there all day long, every single day. So I just know that I need those things personally for my health and to be able to do this and have longevity. So I think I'm doing an all right job. I'm here in Costa Rica, 5 weeks total, and I can put it away and just go and enjoy myself. But I got no problem like getting out the laptop and spending a few hours of one of my days on my vacation just trading. Like I'm fine with it, right? So it's I don't know, it's a balance. It's a negotiation at times also, with my girlfriend who's super supportive and awesome. But I've got ninja alerts on my phone all day long, and so that's a difficult thing to just tune out. But I'm just in a place where I want to make the most of the opportunity. And so I don't think that my mind, like I'm not always antsy, like thinking like, oh my gosh, what am I missing? What am I missing? But I put myself in the position that I could catch an opportunity, even if I'm away from home and doing something. I got no problem. Like I started trading just on my laptop, being on the road, like in the backseat of the car, like, so I'm fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I don't think I'm too antsy, but I like to know what's going on. I like to keep my ear to the ground, and I want to be in a position, to be. I think so much of trading is just maximizing the likelihood of being in the right place at the right time, and so that's what I intend to do, even if I'm working on other stuff or I'm away.
So in your case, I mean, more specifically, what that looks like is that you're out in the woods or wherever you are right now, building your sauna, right? And you have your phone next to you with ninja alerts on so that it could pop up at the appropriate time. Do you have like block times when you're willing to miss out on something and you explicitly don't have your phone away? Like, what does that look like exactly?
I just pretty much, if I've been away from my screen for a while, then when I'm back on it, I'll open ninja alerts and I'll scroll until the last thing that I had seen. So if I've been away for 4 hours, I'll scroll the last 4 hours of ninja alerts and get an idea of everything that's happened. All the wallets that I'm tracking, at least what they've done. And then if I'm sitting at my computer, I'm on Tys.eth and I'm scrolling. I mean, not always exactly to where I left off. That'd be ridiculous. But I've got a lot of lists curated on Tys.eth, and so I'm just scrolling that and seeing what's happened in the last day or 3 hours, whatever it is. And then if I see a bunch of ninja alerts going on, right, and there's something clearly going on that's interesting and I want to be a part of it or I want to check it out, then sometimes I'll drop what I'm doing and go home and I'll go check it out.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's, what I'm hearing you say is, if something's really hot or intriguing, okay, that might be the time where you drop something. But otherwise, it seems like under normal conditions, especially lately, like you take more of a batched approach, right? Maybe it's 3 hours, 4 hours. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay. So either way, either in the batched way or in like the triggered way, right? That's like more short term and you need to drop your stuff. And so what happens next at that point, right? I know you have either one or several opportunities that you're like considering to go into, right? So you conduct your research at that point. What kind of research are you doing? How does the thinking and Tys's hypothesis creation go? Like, what is that next thought process at that point?
Yeah. So if I'm entering a trade, it's happening one of two ways. I'm either just like showing up because there's something that's high volume and I'm feeling degenerate and I'm just like, this looks good. And typically if I'm trading something, I'm doing heavy volume. I don't usually just like, I'm just going to buy a couple of these and see what happens. I'm more take a high volume approach. And if I'm going to enter something, like I usually make big bets. But there will be times I will literally walk into my office, something's flying, and I just like think, I'm like, this looks good, and I start buying it. And then there are other times, which is my preference, that I've been, I'm always like thinking about what's going on in NFTs. I'm always, like I said, I'm on TweetDeck and I'm observing the market. I'm in Discord. I'm reading things. I read in Discord way more than I type or talk. And I'm kind of building models in my mind of like what I think is likely to happen next. So, I mean, right now we see Jack Butcher having a lot of success with checks and all of that. And to me, he's pioneering using Ethereum as a canvas, experimenting with, art changing and being temporary. And people talk about storytelling NFTs, but to me, he's like telling a story in real time without being like, this is a storytelling NFT. And he's really setting an example of how to capture attention. And then also there's like the social commentary element. Like I think between him and the memes by 6529, there is something kind of brewing that's like this social, like NFTs as social commentary. And people, I mean, NFTs have always been a way to place bets on a meme spreading, but I think they're just amplifying that. So, for example, I'll be looking at that and just wondering, okay, what are Jack Butcher's next moves? Like if this guy could drop a project and it would be one of the most, like a new project, whatever that is, and it would have the chance of being one of the most hyped ever because he has the attention right now. So I'll just kind of be thinking of like, I wonder what that could be, or who's out there watching Jack Butcher right now, and like this is inspiring them to create something, and they're going to piggyback off of this and do something even bigger. So I'll be in my mind thinking about like what things we might see, or even just more simply, I'm watching like Franklin and how he's trading, and I'm seeing him sweep floors, raise the floor and then sell into bids. So I'm like, okay, I wonder what floor Franklin's going to sweep next. So I'm always just thinking, whether it's just like little details like that. Sorry, I was getting a call. Whether it's just little details like that on like a specific whale and what I think they're going to do next, or it's a higher level meta that I think will emerge. I just try and stay in that part of my mind. And then that way, when those things pop up, if something comes up that I was like, oh, I was anticipating that this was likely, then for me, I'll usually just act on it. I don't spend too much time thinking or considering like, oh, like, is this going to be good? I don't hesitate much. If something comes up and it just feels right to me because I'd already been anticipating it, then I usually will just go for it and act on it.
Yeah, you've already spent the time at that point to think through what might happen and why it might happen. You've done the analysis already at that point, right? So at that point, it's just go and execution and trusting what your thought process was, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Well, if nobody else feels worse about themselves after hearing that, at least I do. I certainly feel worse about myself after hearing his approach, which I love for whatever it's worth. Definitely something to learn from as well. So, I think the other thing to tease out of what you're saying as well, Tys, is that, I feel like for most of us, right, it's like, I think there's multiple reasons that somebody would make a trade or an investment or something like that, right? Obviously, like the main reason would be there's an edge that exists and it's plus EV, right? Like that's the obvious one that we're all gunning for in all cases, right? And there's like a second category that exists, which is just like, it's almost like, when you go if you're a poker player and you go with your friends to Vegas and you're like, well, you know what, fuck it, I'll play some roulette with them or something. I know it's not a good decision, but I want to have fun and YOLO, and that's it, right? It's that simple. For you, there's like a third category that exists as well, right? Which is this like hypothesis and testing side of things. So like, I know you're comfortable with making bets and making bigger bets if the stars align, and that totally makes sense to me. How do you allocate capital mentally towards testing? Like, how do you think about that? Is it just like a very small portion of the capital, and if it works, you'll expand it? Or how do you think about how you allocate that portion of capital?
Sure. I think typically I tend to go heavier right up front and then just continue doubling down until it's not working anymore. Rather than like, and it goes both ways. There's times where I might nibble and then I'm like, okay, this trade looks like it's going the right direction. I'm going to go heavier. But I usually like to make a statement and say like, I'm going for this. Like if you you also think this is a good idea, then follow me now. Rather than like, okay, I'm just going to nibble and see how the market what other people are thinking and see if it goes. I tend to just go heavier up front. Like an example is like these OPEPins. Like I knew there was attention on Jack. They'd already pumped pretty good to 0.4, but to me, there was a lot of attention on him, just waiting for him to tweet something. I'd already seen and this is the thing, I'd seen other whales nibbling, and they were just nibbling here or there. So I'm like, okay, like they're waiting, but they're primed to do some sweeping. Well, there's a lot of like, volume farming and sweeping and all that going on. Like, I just think this is a collection that's going to get swept. So rather than being like, oh, I'll buy a couple and see what happens, I was like, I'm going to go hard on this, right? So I'm not usually thinking in percentages or like, this is how much I'm willing to allocate. I just look at my balance and I might be looking at what is the amount that I can spend to significantly impact the floor, and at what point is there, I don't know. Honestly, it's not too like data driven or thinking about percentages of what I'm comfortable with or anything like that. I just go a lot by feeling, and I'm willing to take my trading balance and like spend it all, right? Because that's what it's there for. It's there to trade. And so OPEPs are an example where my initial trade went super well, like swept really heavy. An hour later, I exited for like 18 ETH. And then since then, I've continued with that strategy, but making diminishing returns pretty much every time. And now my most recent sweep, like that's down a few ETH, right? So I took that 18 ETH profit, ran it up to 30, and now it's like 26 or something like that, right? So now it's like, okay, this strategy is going the other direction. And where I've had difficulty in the past is I want to push things. I want to keep milking something for everything that it's worth. So one of my lessons is definitely knowing when to stop and just be like, feel good about the success that I had. Because I definitely tend to just like push things until the opportunity is basically not there anymore. Yeah.
I mean, what also stands out to me about what you're saying is how much you're focused on, like you said, making big and more importantly, concentrated bets, right? Like you wait for your perfect lineup and then you go at that point, right? Like that's the bet that you're going to make and you're fully comfortable pushing the chips in at that point, right? If you have the perfect setup. That's definitely interesting. And I feel like also what you're saying, the back part of it, right? Like the tail, let's call it, like you make your initial amount on a trade, and then you still think the opportunity is there, so you continue to push the edge at that. Like, I mean, well, on the one hand, I know you're tough on yourself and you're always trying to learn, right? And diminish the backside losses. That on the other hand, like I feel like it's just a consequence of your approach, isn't it? Like you're always going to try to push the edge until you think it's not there.
Oh yeah. I
don't know how much there's changing that necessarily.
Anybody who follows my wallet knows that I've had like just disgusting losses, and we can say that for a lot of us. It's just part of the game. I think one thing that's just gone really well for me is I just can stomach it. I'm willing to have that happen. And honestly, I think it's funny because if I look at all my losses, it's easy to say like, oh, if I didn't make those bad trades, imagine how much more I would have made. But really, I think that like I started in this game bringing like I said, $20,000 over to BitCloud. I don't even know how much ETH that was at that time. But I think my willingness to stomach like big losses and just go heavy ended up being the difference between me making a couple hundred ETH or over 1,000 ETH, which is what I did. And so right now, though, this is the thing, is I think I was just a beneficiary of the market rewarding that kind of behavior. So even though I'm still more inclined to take bigger bets, I have definitely seen like over this last year where we've been playing the game on difficulty mode versus easy mode, my strategy or my way of trading has not been as successful at all as it used to be, right? So it's been a process for me to learn, how am I going to adapt to this market? Do I need to rein it in? Do I need to be more specific with my bets? And so that's been a process for me, right? Like just being like high volume, big bets all the time. I definitely find that it's not as successful now as it was.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I got a few follow-up questions for you, but let's start first from the crowd, which Scott was asking, how much do you utilize Discord sentiment to help inform your trades? Is that part of your decision criteria? Is it noise? How do you treat it?
Okay, it is, but interestingly, sometimes the best alpha you can get from a Discord is people fading something. So like Brain Drops, that recent AI project, Life in West America, like I was going through Discords and like people were so quiet about it. And I talked about it in here and there was kind of like crickets. And so I was like, this is interesting because I saw on Twitter like some notable people talking about it. And usually it's like if you can see a couple people saying that they're interested in something. So like Derek Edwards, the guy from Flamingo DAO, he does that podcast with Kevin. And then a couple other whales that I saw on Twitter specifically saying they were looking forward to this. If you see like 2 or 3 big collectors that are into a project, then it's likely there's another 3 or more, like there's a few more that you just aren't talking about it, but they're going to be there too, because like all the biggest collectors in our space, they tend to gravitate towards the similar art and similar artists, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, I've seen big collectors talking about this, but Discords seem to be sleepy on it. I think there's a disproportionate opportunity here. And so I bought I went fairly heavy on Life in West America, and that ended up being a great trade. Whereas like other times, like it seemed like, I mean, easy, this is too easy and obvious of an example, but like Captains, right? Like it was all everybody was thinking and talking about, and it was great for anybody that minted, but anybody that was intending to like go hard on that at mint, like it was not the play. So sometimes, yeah, the best alpha that you can get from Discord sentiment is like, do I think there's like a disproportionate opportunity here where people are going to have to FOMO in later rather than like compete with me for, buying those early mints at a low price?
So the other question that Skakko has actually links in really, really well to what you're saying right now, which is, with part of the current NFT meta, and I think it's, been in and out for some time, but with current NFT meta, where someone enters a trade and then there's a follower effect that exists, right? So you're using alerts, you're using tracking systems, and other people then follow afterwards, right? What are your thoughts about that? How does that impact your decision making? How do you think that impacts markets in general? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think we go through metas in wallet tracking. So like there's a time obviously where just buy everything Gary Vee buys and you're going to do great. Then eventually Gary Vee was a top signal. There's a time where it was like buy everything that the cyberkongs are buying. And then eventually the cyberkongs were the top signal. And so there's always like these main characters in trading, where if you catch that meta early, it's like just follow them because they're first. And then that's going to work out until they become the top signal and doesn't. So there's no yeah, when it comes to wallet tracking, that's typically how I see it, especially in like a really hot market right now. I don't think it's as clear. There's no one person that you can just like, track their wallet and have success every time. But then there are, I think, just like the big collectors in the space or whales or people that have a lot of ETH to deploy. And if they're like collecting a piece of art or nibbling on something here or there, sometimes you can follow those breadcrumbs and find something that's interesting. Or like the Life in West America, I think, was just a good example of like early there being big whale art collectors in my ninja alerts that were all buying it quite early. And I was like, this is good because I can buy here at 0.6 and like it's just safe. It's like these guys are all collecting here. It's like that's the biggest thing there is like it can give you faith on where there might be support for a collection. And that's, yeah, I think that's how I use it right now. And then, or every once in a while, something mints that is just like an absolute, like somebody could come out right now, like Jack Butcher could release a new collection, right? And you want to have wallet trackers just because if people from MVHQ and Underground and everybody is minting this thing, then that's the reason to like have it and have access to it at all times, because those things will take you by surprise. I mean, back in the day, there were things like loot, right? Where it was just like, if you were available to mint at that time, like that could have been your only trade that you ever made and you would have made it. So the wallet trackers is, in that case, it's just to not miss out on those like no brainer big ones, but we haven't seen as many of those in recent times.
I always that totally makes sense, and I always appreciate too when and have a laugh when, like you said, there's the main characters, and at some point they become a top signal, and then you can see that they realize they became a top signal at that point.
Sure, yeah.
That's the funniest. Like when Aoki came out and heard that he was called the top signal at the time, and like tweeted about it or said something at some point. Always just
yeah, but it's unfortunate for Aoki because he never had the opportunity to be like the alpha, like Steve Aoki's buying, like we got to ape it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he just started and ended as a top signal. Well, no, I think he started as a top signal and then got more intelligent as time went on. So he's like the inverse of that.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. One other data piece that I think is worth talking about connected to this too, which increasingly, like, we have platforms that exist, right? We have Blur, we have other platforms that exist. As a result of that, as you know, there's wash trading that exists, or sorry, not wash trading, but like, yeah, I guess essentially wash trading and point earning trading and actions like that. How is that data factoring into your decision making, if at all? Is that something you now need to consider, and like, how are you considering it, if so?
Yeah, to me, the thing that stands out is just that the game is changing. I think now it's more like a game of like poker or chess a lot of the time, where you're just you're sitting at the table with opponents that you've gotten to know over time. And part of the game is understanding how they play and anticipating their moves, anticipating their hand. And it's kind of just like PvP like that. So it's very different than like, all this capital is like flowing in and like we're gonna dump our bags on the normies or like whatever. Like that whole thing is, and the way the game was played is just different. Now with Blur and all of that, I do think it's more like a poker game or chess game, and which can be fun. If you have a few wallets in particular that are super high volume, and you notice how they can move collections, and the more that you watch them, the more you might be able to anticipate what they're going to do next. And then front run that activity. But again, like in this market, people catch on quick. So a lot of those things have a short lifespan, whereas then it's like now this person comes in to go and sweep the collection and push the floor up so they can sell into bids. But as soon as they sweep, now the floor instantly dumps. So it's like they're going to have to take a step back, take a breather, like let it all like regroup before they come back and do that again. So the game is just changing, and I think that that's going to continue more as marketplaces compete with each other and innovate, find new ways to bring liquidity to the market or add incentives. For me, the biggest thing, I don't really know where it's all going. It's really hard for me to speculate on like what this market's going to look like in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. Like I don't really know exactly. So for me, the biggest thing is I don't spend too much time thinking about where I think that's all headed. I just want to stay in the game and experiment at all times. Like I am willing to spend capital, or risk capital, I should say, in favor of education and learning and just being in the game, and not falling behind. And so when it comes to Blur, I just think the best thing is to do all of it. Like watch what Franklin and Machi Big Brother and some of these other wallets are doing, and see if there is an opportunity in there. If you can anticipate their moves, participate in even if like you're not expecting the farming rewards to be great this time around, or you don't think that you're going to earn enough points for it to be meaningful, I think it's worth playing the game just to be engaged and have a pulse and know where it is, because that way when an opportunity does spring up, you're just prepared and ready to take advantage of it, rather than hearing about on Twitter what a cook it was after the fact. So that's just how I look at it. Is like for me, the key to succeeding in this game is just staying in it. So that means two things. Like one, like being engaged, playing the game, experimenting with everything, trying things out, and being willing to risk capital to do so. And then second, keeping yourself in the game by not risking too much and not, never betting the farm or over allocating, knowing just what that level is for you that you can risk at any given moment. And as long as you keep yourself alive and you stay engaged, then I think you'll put yourself in that position to be in the right place at the right time, to make those trades because really, if I look back at the last couple of years, it's like doing high volume and being there all the time and flipping and all of that, like it worked out well. But really, I could have. It was like just a handful of trades or opportunities in each year that like were the vast majority of where the profit came from, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm flipping garbage, or I'm sitting there and I'm watching TweetDeck and doing nothing, or I'm sitting there and I'm placing blur bids, or I'm sweeping and selling, or whatever, and maybe barely making money or losing a bit, just so that I can be prepared for when that big one does come.
It's like what you're saying, by the way, is like such a strong parallel to poker, and it kind of gives me a throwback in terms of that one of the episodes we had a while back when Ruthless was on, and him and I were riffing on poker. And I think there's one distinct difference between the two of them, but other than that, like there are metas in poker, for instance, right? The metas are like how people place bet sizes and what patterns exist and how they approach certain things and how the game evolves. It's very, very similar to what you're saying. The only difference I think that exists is that in this case, some people have anonymous wallets, right? Whereas in poker, you know who the person is in most cases who's taking the actions. You could like take notes on them. And like, in addition to knowing the meta, in this case, a little bit more ambiguous, right? Because people could have multiple wallets, hidden wallets, you get the point. But very, very, very parallel. So another question from live crowd coming, which is about stomaching big losses, which I know is something that's always on everyone's minds, right? In a hot topic. But it's less about that side of things and more about your discretion about when you need to cut losses when you're losing. And obviously for like myself, a lot of folks, it's very tough to get that right? And figure out, look, I made an attempt, I had a hypothesis, I went with it, it was wrong, it's time to cut bait. How do you tend to think about that at that point? Do you, in terms of whether you cut bait immediately, whether you wait it out a little bit longer? Is there anything that kind of guides you on that, or is a North Star?
Yeah, so I think the most obvious one is I ask myself, like, are there catalysts coming that I anticipate or that I know are coming that are going to bring life and volume to this collection? And if they are, then I need to maybe sit on my hands. Maybe I need to actually buy lower, and I need to be patient. Because sometimes the trade doesn't go my way and I just want to rage quit and get the ETH back in my wallet and move on to the next one. But typically if I'm rage quitting or I'm exiting a trade out of frustration, it can work out, but it's a roll of the dice. It's like, whatever. There's no thought going into it. So typically I try to avoid just rage quitting, and exiting my position and just saying, fuck it, I'm going to take my losses. But if I genuinely am looking at this collection, I'm like, okay, I believe this top. I don't see any clear catalysts. Now that I have a sober mind and I know this isn't the next Bored Ape or whatever, like I can say with a clear, sober mind, like, why would anybody want to buy this? I don't know. So I don't think this is going anywhere but down. So the best time to sell is right now because the price will likely never be higher. So if that's what I believe, I will just take losses. I will not sit there and hope, well, maybe like this is going to happen. Like I won't sit there and like invent stories, or at least I try not to sit there and invent stories about how that project is going to come back to life. I will just say to myself, like, okay, this ETH can be better used elsewhere. And so at the end of the day, like I'm just making the best decision for that capital because I think that there is a better opportunity somewhere else. You could look at it just quite simply. It's like, is this ETH going to grow more sitting in this collection or in my wallet staying totally stable and prepared to be deployed somewhere else? And so I try and just answer that question as honestly as possible, even if it brings me pain. And then I cut those losses. I'm trying to consider a time where maybe it was most difficult, but I think I'm a little bit, in the beginning, I definitely remember times where often what hurt me most was not even just losing ETH, but it was feeling stupid. Like I remember Gutter Cat releasing, they were releasing Gutter Rat. And like, I was so green and dumb. Like I thought like, okay, I need to be ready to buy like the first listings that become available. Like I need to buy this as early as possible. And so of course, like, I bought, and then within like after all the listings started pouring in, like it was very quickly like a third of the price. And so what hurt me more was not even just losing ETH; it was just feeling dumb and like, how did I not see that coming? Like that was ridiculous. I'm so stupid. So sometimes you just gotta just live with that, and like I let myself just feel dumb for a little bit, but it's difficult for me personally to stay hung up on something when I know that there's another opportunity around the corner. And so I'm just going to be in a better position to take advantage of it if I'm just focused with eyes forward. So I don't really have any particular advice on like how I do it. I just think at this point I've accepted that it's a part of the game. And I mean, I'm always like, I have my trading balance in my trading wallet. Like I've got my ETH and I'm willing to make bets with all of it. Right. And I don't want to lose the whole balance, of course. So I'm not going to put it all into something that I'll bet it all on something that I feel confident I can exit, at a 20% loss or whatever it is. Like I'm willing to take a big loss and then move on, but I wouldn't put it all somewhere and say like, I'm going to hold this for a few months and like, let it go up. Like if I think something has a chance of going to zero, like I'm not going to bet the whole balance on it. But so yeah, what I'm trying to say is I'm willing to spend my entire trading balance. But I'm not willing, but I'm going to be prepared to exit and take a loss if I have to. And then I've got, the rest of my capital elsewhere. So like my trading balance is my trading balance. That's its purpose. That's not the money that I'm like living off of. So if that's your case where it's like, if you've ever got in your trading balance, like in your ETH hot wallet, money that you need for a purchase or to survive or whatever it is, like that is the thing that I think would be dangerous. Because it opens up the opportunity for things to become a lot more emotional and fight or flight and just making bad decisions. I think like you need to just see that balance in the wallet that you're trading with as it has a specific purpose, and taking losses is just part of the game that you're playing with that balance. And then that's one way that I've just kept myself safe and able to take those, because I don't ever feel like there's like a huge threat to my well-being if I took a 20% loss on that balance.
I mean, the simplicity of like what you and everything you're saying makes, of course, total sense. And the simplicity of like one of the things you said is it's like incredibly simple, right? Like objectively, not contrived. Do I think that this thing that I'm invested in has a chance to go up? Is there anything that's going to catalyze it from going up? If no, sell. Like it's like the simplest thing ever, the way that you're distilling it, and hopefully very, very useful and aligned. I don't know, maybe I'll type it and put it on the side of my computer or something like that to remember, or write it down or something. But it's so simple. And I think the other subtext that I hear in what you're saying too, right, is in addition to what you said at the end, right, that not having money you really need invested, right, or deployable, but having money you can afford to lose. In addition to that, like the subtext of what I hear you saying is about sunk cost, right? The fact that like you're not using, if you invested one ETH in something, you're not using the one ETH as the baseline for what you need to get back to, right? That's gone at that point, right? The fact of the matter is that it's at 0.7 at this point, right? And as a result of that, like, what's my best decision now? Forget about the fact that I lost 0.3 already. That means nothing, right? Absolutely nothing, because you can't control that anymore. So what direction is it likely to go into now, uncontrived? And it's that simple. And so I really appreciate what you just said. I thought it was just like done simple and very, very useful. And I mean it. I may create coming off of this, like magnets or something for people to stick on their monitors or things like that. And if I do that, we'll make sure to get you royalties when people buy those as well.
Great. Yeah. And I think the other thing that just helps is perspective. Like to be able to do what I am doing, is like I'm in the freaking like top 0.1 or smaller than that, like percentage of just like fortunate, privileged people on the whole planet. Like it's ridiculous. So it's like, if I take a loss on a project, then I can still look at my bank account and feel totally like comfortable and with my lifestyle. And that's just for me. Not everyone's going to be in that position. And I wasn't when I started even. So but for me right now, it's just perspective of like, at the end of the day, like what changes in my day to day or my lifestyle because I took this loss, and it's like, it's nothing. But if you're in a position where it's like, oh no, I took this loss and like now I'm not gonna be able to make my car payment, then I would, if that were me, like I'd be focused on changing that situation, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, when I started, I'm just considering like, earlier on, like when the stakes, when a loss was a bigger deal or the stakes were higher. But I think really all it was just like the confidence that there's going to be another opportunity.
That makes total sense. So cognizant of time, Tys, before we wrap up, I have a request from the crowd for a nostalgia call out from the 2021 bull run, maybe even into 2022. Do you have a particular memory, either trading memory or from voice chat, that you really found memorable or really makes you happy when you think about it? Anything stand out?
Okay, something's popping up, but I'm gonna probably have to like let it all come back to me. I remember going in, Andy Milanakis' Discord, like in his voice chat, like MVHQ, like the whole voice chat, like left MVHQ and went into Andy Milanakis' voice chat and was like putting just like gifs and ridiculous stuff like in his general chat in his Discord, and like totally just like took it over. And I just remember everybody like laughing so much, and it was honestly so silly and dumb and childish, but I just remember cracking up and having tears in my eyes. Yeah, it was pretty hilarious.
This is for a goat soup, I assume? Is it goat soup?
Yeah, goat soup.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody's going to be able to take that joke, it would have to be Andy Milonakis, right? Like, so that seems like the perfect person.
But I think he actually got like pretty rattled. Like maybe someone in here remembers more clearly, but I feel like he was like getting mad.
That's interesting. I remember when that project came out, and like, we'd only heard so much from him in a while, and I don't know, at least from my vantage point, like I thought so highly of him for what he was doing and like jumping into the space, and I thought it was awesome for whatever it's worth. Notwithstanding the fact that we had some fun with him as well, but I had also really good fond memories of when he came into the space too. So, Tys, overall, man, this is just awesome episode. Kind of as we talked about, like definitely unconventional compared to most of the episodes that we have, and it stands out kind of as its own thing. And I'm really appreciative that you came on and you were so willing to talk through step by step exactly what your methodical process is and how it affects you and all that. So really, really appreciative of that. For the live crowd, of course, really appreciative of your questions and thoughts and just everything that you always do in terms of feedback and otherwise. For our not live crowd or listening crowd also, really appreciate you too. So thanks so much again. Tys, thank you so much again for coming on and for sharing so much. And we'll look forward to next week again, everyone, similar time. And we'll see everyone down in VC1. Thanks, everyone.